You are comparing your messy internal struggle with someone else's highlight reel. Every minute you spend envying their results is a minute you steal from your own execution, feeding your self-loathing instead of your business. I have observed this ritual countless times, usually around 11:30 p.m., just when the last vestiges of productive energy are dissolving into exhaustion. You sit there, bathed in the sickly blue light of the screen, scrolling through the carefully curated digital mausoleums of success. It is not curiosity that holds your gaze. It is a morbid fascination with perceived superiority. You are attempting to self-medicate the pain of your own stagnation by consuming the simulated velocity of others. Look closer at the screen. There is Zach, 24, standing on the stern of a yacht somewhere near St. Bart's, captioning his photo with some vacuous platitude about manifesting abundance or the 5 a.m. hustle. His success is loud, immediate, and utterly opaque. You know intellectually that the private jet photos are often staged, that the instant wealth story is usually predicated on 3 years of crippling debt and a family bailout. But the primitive core of your brain does not deal in intellectual nuance. It deals in status, resources, and threat assessment. What you are engaging in is not harmless procrastination. It is ascendant social comparison, a corrosive psychological mechanism designed to deactivate your focus. When you, the struggling founder whose profit margin barely covers the cost of cheap coffee and rent in a city you despise, look at Zach's infinity pool, your limbic system does not register inspiration. It registers a profound, immediate deficit of status. This deficit is not merely emotional, it is a physiological threat signal. For millennia, low status in the tribal hierarchy meant less access to food, mating opportunities, and physical safety. Your brain is a relic of that harsh calculus. When you perceive yourself as definitively inferior to Zach, the archetype of the effortlessly rich young predator, your body responds as if you are about to be ostracized from the tribe. The immediate consequence is the activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis. This is the stress engine. The constant insidious drip of cortisol begins to wash over your system. People often mistake cortisol for the chemical of motivation, believing stress fuels action. This is a vulgar misunderstanding. Acute stress sharpens attention for immediate survival, fight or flight. Chronic status-based stress, the kind induced by daily comparison, does the opposite. It degrades the integrity of your mental architecture. The prefrontal cortex, PFC, the region responsible for executive function, planning, complex problem-solving, emotional regulation, and delayed gratification, is highly sensitive to this toxic environment. When cortisol levels are chronically elevated, the PFC begins to shut down non-essential functions. And what does the primitive brain deem non-essential? Abstract business modeling, strategic planning for Q4, and the painstaking, unglamorous work of debugging code or cold calling difficult clients. You find yourself staring at your business plan, unable to synthesize a single coherent thought. That heavy, muddy feeling, that inability to initiate the next crucial task, is not laziness. It is neural paralysis induced by perceived low status. Your system is screaming, "We are losing. We must conserve energy or seek immediate low-effort reward." This mechanism, this internal saboteur, is perfectly calibrated to drive you toward inertia. The comparison provides a temporary, cheap hit of dopamine, the chemical of seeking. You seek novelty, context, and the fleeting intellectual superiority of judging Zach's superficiality. But this seeking is detached from execution. You receive the dopamine hit of observing success without paying the toll of earning it. This is the central fraud of the spectator syndrome. You are satisfying your brain's craving for achievement narrative through consumption rather than creation. I recall a client, a man named Ethan, who ran a modest but promising software consultancy in Seattle. Ethan was brilliant, meticulous, and fundamentally decent. His business grew 15% year over year, a sustainable, healthy trajectory. Yet, he was miserable. His misery was meticulously maintained by following 27 individuals who claimed to have scaled to 8 figures in under 18 months, selling digital courses on how to scale. Ethan described the experience as watching the flow state of a competitor while paralyzed in his own starting blocks. "I know my product is better," he confessed, his voice hollow. "But when I see their revenue screenshots, I feel like a provincial failure. My 15% growth looks like a slow death march." We mapped his usage patterns. Ethan spent, conservatively, 90 minutes a day engaged in ascendant social comparison. 90 minutes stolen directly from deep work. Worse, the 45 minutes immediately following the scroll were useless, contaminated by a viscous residue of shame and inadequacy. He was trying to build a solid, functional house while constantly injecting structural rot into the foundations. The irony is vicious. The very act intended to spur motivation becomes the engine of professional castration. You look at the wealth of others and conclude subconsciously that the game is rigged, the odds are impossible, and therefore, the high-effort path is futile. Why bother struggling for 15% growth when Zach seems to have conjured 1,000% from thin air? This cognitive distortion, rooted in the chronic cortisol bath, leads to a collapse of congruence. Congruence is the alignment between your stated values, e.g., I am a serious entrepreneur focused on long-term value, and your actual behavior, e.g., I spend 2 hours daily validating the superiority of my competitors. When these fracture, you stop trusting yourself. The internal dialogue devolves into self-contempt. This cycle of observation, status loss, cortisol spike, PFC shutdown, and subsequent self-loathing is the primary antagonist in the modern digital marketplace. It is not the competition from the market that is killing your business. It is the competition you choose to invite into your own mind. We must understand that the digital success reel is not a map. It is propaganda. It is a highly optimized biological weapon designed by algorithms to keep you scrolling, consuming, and paralyzed by the illusion of effortless victory. The creators of this content are not necessarily malicious. They are simply masters of signaling. They understand that status signals, expensive watches, exotic locations, numerical boasts, are the most efficient triggers for engagement and self-doubt. To break this paralyzing inertia, we must first recognize the deep, primal cost of this comparison habit. It is not merely a waste of time. It is a physiological attack on your capacity for focus and sustained effort. You are willingly poisoning the well of your own potential. The solution does not involve a sudden surge of positive thinking. That is the shallow approach of motivational charlatans. The solution requires a cold, clinical implementation of Kosh protocol, a rigid, almost monastic shielding of your cognitive resources. We must treat the comparison habit not as a weakness of character, but as a severe security vulnerability in your BEAS mental architecture. And just as a serious enterprise implements a firewall against external threats, you must implement a system of blindagem shielding against internal and external status threats. The problem, however, runs deeper than simply blocking Instagram. It requires confronting the underlying psychological insecurity that makes you need to look sideways in the first place. Why is your internal validation engine so dependent on external comparative data? Why is the silent, difficult process of creation less compelling than the loud, synthetic spectacle of consumption? This vulnerability often stems from a lack of clarity regarding your own defined success parameters. If you do not possess a clearly articulated, deeply personal definition of victory, one that is resistant to external metrics, then the narrative of others will always hijack your trajectory. You become a satellite orbiting someone else's gravitational pull. The first step in establishing the procrastinate protocol is the ruthless auditing of your information diet. You must become a predator of your own attention, hunting down and eliminating every source that triggers the HPA axis without providing genuine, actionable insight. This is not about censoring information. It is about protecting the delicate chemical balance required for high-level execution. When you see Zach's yacht, your internal narrative must shift from, I am failing because I don't have that, to, that data point is irrelevant to my current operational objectives. This requires a radical reframing of what constitutes relevance in your entrepreneurial ecosystem. Your relevance is determined by your daily adherence to your own metrics, not by the simulated metrics of a stranger. We must begin to construct a durable inner framework, a procrastinate mental architecture, so robust that external signals of status or wealth merely register as noise, background static that does not penetrate the core operational systems. This framework is built upon the foundational realization that true entrepreneurial success is defined by the depth of your struggle, not the superficiality of your display. The messy internal struggle you are currently experiencing is the forging process. The highlight reel is just the highly polished, brittle result. The goal is to achieve congruence by aligning your perception of status with competence. Status, in the context of deep work and genuine value creation, is earned through mastery and effort, not through displayed consumption. When you prioritize the appearance of success over the grueling work that generates it, you are actively choosing the path of chronic stress and failure. The immediate physiological task is to starve the HPA axis of its comparison fuel. This requires recognizing the exact moment the seeking behavior begins. That slight itch, that momentary boredom with your current task, that whisper of inadequacy, that is the vulnerability. That is the moment the internal threat assessment begins, demanding external validation or comparison. We must replace the seeking of external status updates with the pursuit of internal mastery. This is the cornerstone of the shielding wire protocol. When the urge to scroll arises, you do not fight it with willpower. You redirect the energy toward a predetermined, low-activation task critical to your business, a micro-win that re-engages the PFC and provides a healthy, earned hit of dopamine, signaling progress rather than deficit. This simple redirection is the first line of defense against the corrosive power of ascendant social comparison. This simple redirection is the first line of defense against the corrosive power of ascendant social comparison. But let us be surgically honest about why most fail this rudimentary test. The redirection is simple, yes, but the ego is addicted to the drama of comparison. It is easier, fundamentally, to sit in the familiar, dark comfort of inadequacy, to envy Zach's digitized success, than to generate your own messy, unglamorous victory. Envy requires zero operational effort. Creation demands everything. You find yourself scrolling, not because you seek inspiration, but because you are seeking an excuse. You are looking for proof that the game is rigged, that the odds are stacked, or, conversely, that the path to instant wealth is so clear and well lit by Zach's virtual floodlights that you don't need to struggle in the dark anymore. This is the profound deceit of the highlight reel. It offers the illusion of proximity. You mistake the consumption of success for the participation in it. You believe that by intellectually engaging with the result of ambition, you are somehow inoculating yourself against the requirement of effort. You are not. You are merely feeding a cognitive parasite. This is where the neurobiology becomes unforgivingly clear. The comparison habit is not just morally draining, it is a critical resource drain on your prefrontal cortex, PFC. When you initiate the HPA axis response through perceived status inferiority, you flood your system with cortisol. This is a survival mechanism designed to prioritize immediate threat assessment over complex problem solving. Your brain is preparing for a fight for social standing, demanding primitive, immediate solutions. But high-level entrepreneurial work, the kind that builds genuine value, requires sustained focus, abstract reasoning, and the suppression of impulse. These functions are governed by the PFC, which operates optimally under conditions of chemical equilibrium. Every time you consciously engage in ascendant social comparison, you are chemically sabotaging the very organ required to solve the problems that would render Zach's yacht irrelevant. You are actively choosing to disable your own creative engine. The insidious nature of this comparison is the self-imposed inertia it generates. You see the finished product, the seven-figure exit, the flawless aesthetic, the effortless confidence, and your brain calculates the astronomical distance between your current operational reality, the blank screen, the unpaid invoice, the crippling self-doubt, and their simulated perfection. This vast gap triggers a freeze response. Why bother starting, the limbic system whispers, when the distance to victory is so impossibly great? This freeze is not a lack of motivation. It is a pathological state of overmotivation paralyzed by overwhelm. You have allowed the external metric to become your internal standard, and by adopting a standard that is inherently out of reach because it's based on someone else's past, edited effort, you guarantee failure before the first iteration. The true definition of blindagem must therefore be the architectural rejection of external status as a relevant data point. We must treat the pursuit of status, the desire to look successful, as the primary operational threat. The moment you prioritize the appearance of success over the cold, hard reality of competence, you fracture your biaxi congruence. Let us examine the architecture of the failing entrepreneur, the one scrolling through the curated feeds. Their mental architecture is inverted. Their foundational pillar is external validation, and their operational layer is performance. When external validation is the foundation, the structure is inherently unstable. If the market or Instagram stops applauding, the entire edifice collapses, triggering panic and more scrolling, desperately seeking a chemical anchor. The successful protocol, the one championed by those who actually build instead of merely display, operates on the inverse. The foundation is competence, mastery of a specific painful skill, and the operational layer is internal validation, the measurable progress against a self-defined, brutal standard. Status in this system is a passive, delayed byproduct, not an active, frantic pursuit. You must stop viewing your struggle through the filter of their finished product. Your current reality, the grind, the obscurity, the moments of utter despair, is the non-negotiable tuition for mastery. When you look at Zach's life, you are not seeing the struggle. You are seeing the carefully sanitized historical record. The comparison is structurally dishonest, pitting your messy, live operational data against their polished, archived highlight reel. This is why the protocol demands a radical, almost monastic focus on defining your own hierarchy of values. Jordan Peterson speaks of the necessity of defining your personal domain of competence and responsibility. If your highest value is financial freedom through meaningful work, then every hour spent scrolling through Zach's feed, which is non-meaningful and delays financial freedom, is a direct, measurable violation of your core value structure. This violation causes deeper anxiety and self-loathing than any external failure possibly could. The solution is not to look at Zach and say, "I will be better than him." That merely keeps you orbiting his gravitational field. The solution is to define a victory condition so specific to your own unique capabilities and constraints that Zach's existence becomes thermodynamically impossible to care about. For instance, if your business is niche software development for sustainable agriculture, your metric of success is not net worth, but lines of clean code written today, or successful deployment of the new AI module. Zach, selling drop-shipped neon t-shirts from Bali, is operating on an entirely different plane of reality, pursuing different values and facing different demons. His metrics are noise to your system. The implementation of blindagem is the systematic removal of this noise. It requires an audit of every minute spent consuming comparative media. You must ask, did this viewing session increase my competence, enhance my clarity of purpose, or contribute measurably to my defined victory condition? The answer, almost universally, is a cold, hard no. It merely provided a temporary synthetic dopamine hit followed by a debilitating cortisol crash. To break the inertias of comparison, you must implement the anti-spectacle protocol. The goal is to make your own work so compellingly difficult, so internally rewarding through microscopic progress, that the external spectacle loses its savor. You must learn to love the process of solving your own specific problems more than you enjoy observing the simulated success of others. The redirection technique mentioned earlier, the micro-win, is the tactical implementation of this principle. When the urge to look sideways arises, you must deploy a task that is difficult enough to engage the PFC, but achievable enough to guarantee a small earned hit of dopamine within 10 minutes. This could be writing the first 3 bullet points of a difficult email, defining the 3 most critical tasks for the next hour, or cleaning up a single messy database entry. This earned dopamine, unlike the synthetic hit derived from comparison, is chemically congruent with progress. It reinforces the internal belief that effort leads to reward. The comparison loop reinforces the belief that envy leads to pain, but the brain accepts the pain because it is familiar and requires no effort. We are not fighting for a higher status on Instagram. We are fighting for the structural integrity of your internal operating system. We are fighting for likes. Congruence. The alignment between what you say you value, competence, mastery, meaningful wealth, and how you spend your most precious, finite resource, your focused attention. The greatest entrepreneurial failure is not running out of money, it is running out of focused attention because you spent it auditing the success of strangers. This is the silent, ongoing massacre of potential, executed not by market forces, but by self-inflicted cognitive fragmentation. Self-inflicted cognitive fragmentation. The ultimate tragedy of the ascending social comparison is that it fundamentally alters your identity from that of a producer to a highly judgmental consumer. You cease being the architect of your own domain and become a hapless critic in the audience of someone else's blockbuster. The brain, perpetually seeking efficiency, recognizes that generating the complex narrative of Zach became rich is cognitively cheaper than writing the first line of code for your own difficult software module. You are allowing the most critical resource, your attention, to be outsourced to the spectacle, mistaking the consumption of manufactured inspiration for actual, difficult work. This is the deadly inertia of the scroll, an effortless slide towards psychological dependence on external validation. You are not just wasting time, you are training your neural pathways to seek reward through passive observation. You are paying a heavy tax in focused attention for the fleeting luxury of self-pity, which is, neurochemically speaking, nothing more than a cocktail of resentment and unearned familiarity. Let us be surgically clear about the cost. Every time you audit Zach's success, the new Lamborghini, the staged meeting in Manhattan, the effortless vacation in the Maldives, you are performing a silent, brutal surgery on your own sense of self-efficacy. You are not just comparing outcomes, you are reinforcing the insidious, paralyzing belief that success is something granted to others, something external, something achieved without the prerequisite, grinding ugliness you currently face. This false narrative is the antithesis of the entrepreneurial mindset, which must be built on the bedrock belief that effort, responsibility, and suffering are the only reliable inputs to meaningful output. The goal is not merely to stop looking at Zach. The goal is to make the entire activity thermodynamically repulsive. This requires a complete re-engineering of your architecture mental. So, we must implement the final phase of the protocol, which I call the congruence crucible. Step 1. The internal ledger audit. You must establish a private, non-negotiable ledger where the only currency that matters is effort congruent with defined values. This ledger must be entirely inaccessible to external metrics like social media likes, revenue figures initially, or public perception. Viktor Frankl spoke of the last of the human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Your circumstance is the struggle, and your choice must be to value the quality of the struggle itself. Ask yourself, not, am I as rich as Zach, but, did I execute the 3 most difficult tasks on my list today? If the answer is yes, you have earned your dopamine. If the answer is no, then the subsequent anxiety is deserved, not because you are failing the market, but because you are failing the congruence and test. You are failing your own self-defined standards. This internal ledger is your shield. If Zach posts a picture of a private jet, your internal ledger should immediately dismiss it as irrelevant data, because the metric for success that day was finalizing the Q3 financial projections. A task Zach, in his sphere of consumer-facing spectacle, may never have to perform. His private jet is noise. Your clean projection sheet is capital. Step 2. The embrace of the monastic grind. The blindagem. must move beyond merely blocking specific accounts. It must become a structural philosophy of operation. True, deep focus, the kind required to solve genuinely difficult problems, is fragile. It is a state of flow that is instantly shattered by the perceived threat of social inferiority. Therefore, you must deliberately cultivate obscurity. The greatest entrepreneurs in the early stages do not crave the spotlight. They crave the uninterrupted silence necessary for deep work. They are not performing, they are building. Performance is the domain of the consumer entrepreneur, the person who monetizes attention rather than competence. The monastic grind requires treating your workspace, your schedule, and your digital environment as sacred spaces, governed by strict protocol. This means designating specific, walled-off blocks of time, perhaps 90 minutes no less, where the device that allows the comparison to Zach is physically removed from the room, placed in a separate area where retrieval requires significant physical effort. This subtle friction is often enough to break the inertia. We are not fighting the market. We are fighting the neurological impulse for cheap status updates. The only way to win this internal war is to make the true work, the difficult, isolating, often boring work, more accessible and easier to start than the scrolling habit. Step 3. Rejecting the false hierarchy. The underlying poison of comparison is the acceptance of a unified, universal hierarchy of status, usually defined by visible wealth or follower counts. This is a profound cognitive error. Jordan Peterson consistently emphasizes the necessity of carving out your own domain of competence. Your value is not determined by your rank in Zach's game. Your value is determined by your mastery in your game. If you are building niche software for agricultural sustainability, your hierarchy of value places deep domain knowledge and robust code at the top. If Zach is selling aesthetic minimalism to teenagers, his hierarchy places viral engagement and novelty at the top. These are two entirely different games, played with different rules, different penalties, and fundamentally different definitions of success. You must stop implicitly accepting Zach's metrics as superior simply because they are louder. Loudness is a function of marketing budget, not mastery. Mastery is quiet, deep, and often invisible until the results are non-negotiable. When you look at Zach now, you must not see a competitor, but an artifact of a different system. He is the result of optimized performance in the attention economy. You, hopefully, are aiming to be the result of optimized performance in the competence economy. The two orbits should never intersect. If you find yourself in the same room as Zach, you should feel the same level of concern you would feel upon encountering a particularly successful street mime. An interesting phenomenon, perhaps, but utterly irrelevant to the structural integrity of your internal business model. The final critical lesson is that the moment you choose the path of competence and internal mastery, you choose a path of profound, necessary isolation. You are choosing to internalize the burden of meaning. The comparison trap offers an easy out. If you can prove that others have it easier, you have an excuse for your own lack of progress. The anti-spectacle protocol principle forces you to confront the mirror. It forces you to accept that the only thing holding you back is the gap between your stated values and your daily actions, the failure of congruence. This journey is not about finding happiness. It is about finding meaning through responsibility. Meaning is found in the voluntary acceptance of suffering for a higher, self-chosen aim. The suffering of the entrepreneur is the loneliness of the grind, the constant psychological pressure of self-funding, and the necessity of making difficult choices without external validation. Zach's performance on Instagram offers a palliative distraction from this suffering. It promises a shortcut, a fantasy where results arrive without the prerequisite psychological darkness. But the shortcut is a dead end. Your success will be boring. It will be built on thousands of hours of focused, unglamorous effort. It will be built on the quiet satisfaction of solving hard problems that no one else sees. Your victories will be microscopic, internal, and entirely irrelevant to the scrolling masses. The moment you realize that the most valuable thing you possess is not capital or network, but the sanctity of your own focused attention, the war is already half won. You stop investing that precious resource into auditing the fictional lives of others and redirect it surgically into the only place where true wealth is generated: the silent, difficult space between your ears. Build your architecture mental to be impermeable. Let the noise of the spectacle fade into static. Embrace the dark room, the blank screen, and the specific difficult problem only you can solve. Stop looking for external validation. Stop chasing the shadow of Zach's success. The only hierarchy that matters is the one you define, and the only metric that guarantees progress is the relentless, boring, day-by-day enforcement of your own protocol. Go to work. The curtain is closed. The performance is over.